Facebook land. My name is Erica Brown. I am here with Blended Magazine tonight. I am your host, and we have my co-host here, Mr. Jarvis Henderson, by way of Seattle, Washington, by way of Atlanta, Georgia. So tonight, we have a pressing issue that has been kind of crippling our country this past year. However, this month is National Elimination of Racial Discrimination Month. So we're going to talk about racial discrimination. I know sometimes that can be a tough topic for a lot of us who have experienced it firsthand. I'm glad I have Jarvis, a Black man who, of course, you guys have been in the media quite often. In regards to racial discrimination over the past year, but we know it has been decades and centuries. The media is just bringing it to the forefront right now. I thank God for that as well. We're both going to talk about some racial discrimination that we have had. We're going to try and give you one or two times that it has happened, but it has happened probably hundreds of times. So it's not one or two times. So I'm going to let Jarvis jump right on in. And like I said, welcome to Blended and Voice It. Thank you.
All right. Well, I mean, thank you so much, Erica. I love being on with you, by the way. I look forward to our conversations. We always have some great conversations. And, like as soon as you sent me the topic, as soon as you sent me, let me know that it was International Elimination of Racial Discrimination Day. I wanted to be a part of what was happening, and so I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
It's one of those things. I want to celebrate the moment. We have to take advantage of the moments that we have in today's society, and in the way that things go, and the way things have been going. It's been challenging for a lot of people, and that challenging for a lot of people is that we've seen so much happen in the course of a year and a half, just about, or a year and a couple of months, and that racial discrimination has been from so many different angles. And I don't know if you were familiar with it, Erica, but just recently, a situation that happened in the Atlanta area where a white gentleman went into an Asian spa and killed 8 Asian people, and that's got to fall on the level of importance just alongside of Black Lives Matter, and with that level of importance, this conversation that we're going to have tonight is serious and it's real. For me, I've experienced, as a Black man, I've experienced discrimination all my life, but there's those moments in life where you don't know what discrimination is, so you just take it as this is just what life is. I can say between the ages of, as far back as I can remember, let's say, let's go preschool, 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, you're really ignorant to the things that are going on around you. You just know that you're different. You don't know what about you is different. You just know that you're different. And then as you start to build and you start to mature and you get older, you start to see and realize that racial discrimination is real. One of the things that really crazy, really crazy. You want to talk about a moment of being discriminated against. It's kind of it's one of those situations. The situation is my best friend. This man, we grew up we did everything together. This man, he's a white man, and we grew up went to the same middle school, went to the, we just all through life. And I remember going to his house at Christmas time, and I probably had to be at this point probably around 12, 13. Now his grandfather was much older and grew up in the old ways, segregation, racism. And I remember being at his house and we were playing, and all of a sudden he comes to me, he's like, "Hey man, you got to go into my parents' room. We'll take the video game in there." And I'm thinking well, take the video game in there. We're playing Super Nintendo, we're excited, we're having fun. And it's around the holidays. And he was very transparent. He said, "Man, Jay, I'm so sorry. My grandfather is very old school. and he doesn't like black people. And he's like, but it's okay because we love you, and his mom, his dad, everybody else, his sister, him, they never let me feel isolated or ostracized. But I think back to that moment, and it's a pivotal moment for me because that's the first time in my life where I was with people that I love, but they kind of had to hide me. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, that's why I kind of, when you think about the discrimination piece, now that's not a public display of discrimination. It's an internal, it's like a personal, intimate display of discrimination. But grandpa never knew I was in the house. So you have one part of the family that's absolutely in love with you. They love what you, they love who you are. But then there's that piece of the family that holds on to the past. Now, I utilize that situation because it's the first thing that popped in my head. But coming out of that, I started to understand racial discrimination even more, where whether it was teachers, the way that they talked to me, coaches, the way they handled me. As I got older, when I first moved to Florida, I was excited. Here I am going down to an HBCU, Bethune-Cookman in the house, Wildcats, holla at your boy. Well, I don't want to go too deep, but my first experience, I was at a gas station and I walk in the door and the white man behind the counter was like, boy, what you doing in here? And I'm like, I was like, boy, you don't know me. It hit me kind of heavy, and these are like, as I'm speaking to you, I realize that these are like kind of surface level things, right? They're things that anybody can deal with. Like, it's just like, call me boy. That was my first experience though. But as I kept going and I'm starting to think through life, racial discrimination happened in ways like, here it is, I'm on an elevator with, I'm standing on the elevator, I'm traveling for business. A white woman gets onto the elevator and, she kind of looks over her shoulder at me. And I'm on my way down to the gym. So I got on like some sweats, I'm about to go work out, got my gloves on. And I watch her clench her purse with her hand, just hold it tight. You know how you ladies do when you don't want to lose something. And then I watch her put her hand over her necklace. And my thought process, I'm watching this and I'm just like, man, I can't believe this. I can't believe that this woman is actually scared based off of something she heard about what would happen, that she's not comfortable being on the elevator with me. Again, signs of discrimination. Like she's one racial profile of me based off of what she's heard on TV. And then now she's afraid that I'm there. And then, kind of rolling forward. And I know I'm giving you bits and pieces of a lot of different situations, scenarios. Even in the last company that I worked in, there were things that happened that I don't believe were intentional. It was just a lack of understanding, and the last big thing that I can remember is we were creating these ERG groups. And for anybody who doesn't know, those are employee resource groups. And the West Coast had this very strong, very powerful multicultural group. And the multicultural group was led by a Hispanic guy and I think like an Asian woman, if I remember correctly. And then we went into having, we were building one for the Eastern region and this half of the United States. And they appointed leaders. And it was a white guy, white, freckles, redhead, and a white woman, and it, as Blacks that were a part of leadership, we started texting each other immediately. Like, did they ask you about this? Like, did they come to you? Did they want you to be a part of it? And it was never even spoken of. It was a group of them that got together and said, hey, this is a good idea. And again, it wasn't intentional, which kind of falls into that systemic thought process, right? It wasn't intentional, but what happened was they went for the best case scenario. Hey, he's a great orator. Let's have him lead this group. Matter of fact, he loves Black people and every other race. Hey, she's cool. She gets along well with everybody. Hey, let's get in here. And I believe that their hearts were in the right place to want to do something right for people. But systemically, I mean, like as a Black man, myself as a leader in the company, I didn't want to be a part of it. I still was a part of it because I wanted to show the support for those people who were going to come in. But every single person hit me with the same question. It's like, wait a minute, why aren't you or so-and-so leading this group? And why do we have them leading this group? We're not going to be comfortable in this group. So I just gave you like bits and pieces of things, discriminatory type of things that happen through life. And they're things that we normally wouldn't look at as discrimination. A lot of times when we think of discrimination, we automatically think about the situation in the store, the situation at the church, the situation at the school, the situation on the bus. We think about what somebody said to us. where we run into these scenarios of discrimination every single day. And I'll give you one more. Just about 5 months ago, I was working out at a very well-known place in the Atlanta area. It's a very rich, high-end area of Atlanta, Johns Creek area. And I was there, I was training a few people, and they were late. And I was there by myself. I'm just kind of chilling. I got my workout stuff on again. And I walk up to the bleachers. Now, the bleachers have to be at least 15 feet long. And there was an Asian lady that was sitting there. And, she was doing something, kind of stretching or whatever. And I walked up. And immediately, as I sat my bag down, she walked over, kind of looked at me, grabbed all of her stuff, and walked all the way down to the end of the football field and sat her stuff in the corner of the football field and proceeded to start going back around the track, walking around the track. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, wow, this is still happening. This just happened. This woman looked at me, and because of her thought process, she just discriminated against me. And it was out of fear. It was out of the unknown, and so those are things that I know I gave you like a handful of things, and you can pick from any of those that you want to poke at or ask any questions about. But those are things that I can say that I've experienced. And all I did was I just gave you bits and pieces of things that have happened over the years, like very quick.
Those are actually absolutely wonderful. I think I'm gonna pick apart a couple of those right there.
Oh, definitely.
I'm gonna go back to the incident with your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, as a child, sometimes we don't see things, but as an adult, how do you view your friend and how he felt in that moment in which he had to hide someone that he doesn't see as color because of his color? Or if you guys ever spoken about it?
Yeah, I did his father's, I don't want to say eulogy. We just called it a celebration of life. His father passed away last year around this time. And the thing that I spoke on is I spoke about how no matter what happened, they loved us, myself and my sister, regardless. They always made us feel like we were accepted. They always made us feel like we were a part of the family. And to this day, I see him as my brother. That's how I see him. I look at this man like he's my brother. He's going to be getting married towards the later on this year, and I'm supposed to be doing his wedding for him. That's how I see him. Like, I don't hold any resentment because he knew enough to come back and want to protect me. You know what I mean? I don't think it was a Hyde Jarvis type of thing. I think it was, let me protect my best friend, And I'm gonna tell you, like, I actually kind of started enjoying that because they was waiting on your boy hand and foot. Back into the room. We couldn't eat in the rooms, but when Grandpa was there, I was back there eating. So it was like,
I can see that. Absolutely.
So yeah,
good. I couldn't imagine. I'm growing up in the South. I can't say that I had white friends when we were as kids, because I did not. We had those who grew up in the neighborhood with us that we were familiar with, but I couldn't say that they were my friends. Of course, when I got older, that tremendously changed. But as kids, we didn't have a bunch of that. So I can only imagine being on the other end of that, being your friend and having to defend someone who I care about for something so stupid as just the color of their skin. Because that was it. In regards to the young lady at the track, I think sometimes because we've been discriminated against so much, I personally, if I was in her situation, I personally don't care what color your skin was. I would have moved my stuff down all the way down to the.
Are you trying to say I look scary now?
No. No. I said I wouldn't care what color your skin was. So if you were black, white, Asian, it didn't matter. If I was out there with a man and I was the only one out there, I would have transitioned to a different corner because I've done it before.
Oh,
so
it wasn't. There were kids out there for soccer practice.
Okay.
There were families out there. Like there were people.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Now I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now
let me give you some more context. There were people.
That's different.
Yeah.
So
and I can understand if we were the only ones. I definitely.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that I agree with you. I wholeheartedly understand because that has been done to me, and I'm not a man. Right. I'm just a black woman. You know, those things have been done to me just as one of my biggest discriminations is when I moved overseas. I started looking at racism totally different after that.
Yeah.
Because it was no longer black and white for me.
Right.
And my first experience is the first day that I moved there. I mean, that I went there, the first time I had moved yet. And my ex-husband, he had someone meet me to walk me through the whole visa transition because it was new to me over there. So the guy was sitting at the gate. He was waiting for me. He had his little sign up, and I came out, and he was like, "I'm going to take you to get your visa, ma'am. Do you have your passport?" And I said, "Okay, sure." So I handed him my passport. So as I handed him my passport, he took me to the visa counter. He took me to get my passport stamped in, and then he says, "I'm going to take you to get your luggage." And I said, "Okay," but he still had my passport in his hand, and I was like, "Well, when is he going to give me back my passport?" So we get my luggage, and then he says, you know, they were very respectful, always addressed us as ma'am and sir. And he said, is sir waiting on you? And my ex-husband was 2 feet taller than everybody in the audience, so I could see him out of everyone. So I said, yeah, that's him right there. So I get there, and he walks me all the way to him, and he takes my passport, and he handed it to him. And I said, what?
Oh, wow.
So I said, that is mine. And he was like, hold on, Erica, just hold on. I'm going to give you your passport, but this is the way of life over here. So you're going to have to get used to that. They're not going to acknowledge you. They're only going to acknowledge me.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was hard for me initially because I felt like, okay, so who am I, the maid? Because that's what you start to feel like when people won't even hold a conversation with you, but they'll hold it with him.
Right.
So that was hard initially, but I later on started to realize that I'm not going to change these people's way of living. Mm-hmm. I'm not. Right. My second incident also over there, I was in the grocery store. I was at the seafood counter, and I was by myself. I was not with him, and I was waiting to be waited on. So there was no one there. So I saw the guy who normally works in the seafood counter, and I saw him come from the meat counter and come over to the seafood counter. So there was a woman who came up behind me. Right. So when she came up behind me, he looked at her, and he looked at me, and he looked back at her, and he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Really?" So I said nothing because I'm not going to jail in Kuwait. Not at all. So I said nothing. And she said, but she was first. So I was even shocked at her because that was not something normal. That it wasn't normal for if you were Arab, you went before anyone else. Because that's how they did it. Now, my ex-husband, he would argue with them, but I was like, I am not doing that. I am going back to the States one day, and I'm not going to be stuck over here in an Arab jail at all. Yeah. So those were the things that I experienced, that it was merely because I was a woman and I was a Black woman. So there were times that, you know, Actually, I give you another instance. I was in Dubai. So when I lived over there, I had to do flyouts because I wasn't a resident. So I would have to fly out every 90 days.
Okay.
So I would fly out either to Bahrain or to Dubai. With this
Yeah.
particular fly out, I said, you know what, I'm just going to do an overnight turnaround and come right back. So I didn't stay over in the country because sometimes I would stay over in the country and then come back.
Yeah.
So I was doing a turnaround. So I'm at the visa counter in Dubai, getting ready to fly back. And I had on all I had was a hat and a purse. That's it, because I was doing a straight turnaround. And she said, "Could you take your hat off?" And I was like, take my hat off? So she was like, "Yeah." The women have their whole faces covered.
Right.
But she told me I had to take my hat off. So I'm looking around like, you just took a picture with a lady, all you saw was this. But you told me to take my hat off. So I was getting ready to rebel. And I said, I'm not going to jail in Dubai either. Take that hat off, take this picture so you can get on this plane. So those are my, and it was different. Now, of course, I've experienced racism in America as well, but those in the other countries totally changed my outlook on racism here in America, because over there it was mainly because I was a woman. Most people, I wore braids all the time, so most people thought I was African until I started speaking. But outside of that, it was just because I was a woman. So when you get back over here in the States and you start dealing with the same systemic racism when it comes down to black and white, it almost starts to be redundant.
Right.
And more so ignored than anything. And when I say ignored, meaning ignoring the ignorance and focusing on what my position is.
Right.
Because I've learned that people don't tell me who I am. I tell me who I am. So it doesn't matter how they choose to judge me. I know who I am. And it's a lot harder for those who don't, because you'll find yourself in those disputes over what someone else of a different race chooses to think of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't even know how to unpack that. Like I loved Dubai. Like I've been over to Dubai. I know we talked about it before. I absolutely loved it. And it was, when you go into different cultures like that, even like your first story, like we feel as Americans sometimes like racism and discrimination only happens here, but it's because that's what we see, right? You know, like we only see here. But when you get the opportunity to actually go out and be a part of something else, like just to be a part of another culture, you realize that it's not just here. If you think back to all of the things that happened with the George Floyd situation, there were protests, Black Lives Matter protests in the UK, in Italy, and like in all these different countries that, you know, as Black Americans, we overlook because we're so focused on our plight, we're so focused on our struggle. And it's bigger than just a black-white thing, you know, and that whole situation in Atlanta with the Asians. I mean, even think about, unfortunately, when COVID hit, our commander in chief was blaming it on a particular race. Like he blamed it, he kept calling the China flu, the China flu, the China flu. So I can only imagine what happened when people who were of Asian descent, because you know, a lot of times people don't try to figure out, like, are you Japanese, are you Chinese, are you Vietnamese, are you, you know, they just automatically classify everybody together. So I can only imagine the things that they went through. You know,
absolutely.
And as Blacks, we dealt with that. We've been there, like
absolutely
everyday thing.
Yes.
So, but I was just thinking about that. And I even think back to when 9/11 happened. At the time,
I was actually getting ready to say that.
I had a really good friend. Her last name was Afghani.
Okay.
And she was Afghanistan. So when that happened, she had just left and went away to go to school. And she called me crying because students were coming at her, like, you know, like treating her like she bombed the Twin Towers, and she didn't. You know, or just because somebody is a Muslim, they won't, you know, they're a terrorist. No, they're not. Like those things have got to stop and they've got to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of my heroic moments overseas is I was the gym where we lived. We lived in a predominantly Arab neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Cynthia and I actually lived in the same neighborhood. That's where I met her at in Kuwait.
Nicely.
And I used to walk to the gym. And when I walked to the gym, all of a sudden I would see like all the maids and the nannies and the children would start to come outside and start to wave at me. So, I mean, it was like an everyday occurrence. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. So there's no one outside until I start walking down the street. And I was like, this is not a coincidence. So, I mean, they would be excited. It was like I was in a parade and everyone was waving at me from the windows. They would have the kids in the windows. The nannies and the maids would come to the front door and just wave at me. And I was like, this is crazy. So I asked my ex-husband and I said, why are all the nannies and the maids bringing the kids outside every time I walk down the street? So he says, well, do you see any other women walking down the street? And I was like, oh, I guess not. And he says, they think you're a hero. And I was like, something that I take for granted here, because I walk down the street all the time. It's nothing for me to walk my neighborhood. I love walking my neighborhood. So, but when you get there, these women are looking at you like, oh my God, I was a celebrity. I know, right? They're looking like, you know, oh my God, she's walking down the street by herself and she's not afraid. You know, so that in that instance, it's like I gave them some form of hope.
Right.
Like maybe one day I can be, you know, fearless enough to walk down the street by myself and not fear that something is going to happen to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Dang. So now did you know that I was a part of a book?
A part of a book.
A book. Yeah. I co-authored in a book.
Yes, absolutely. I do. Yes.
Yeah. So and the only reason I bring it up, and this is definitely a shameless plug, but the reason I bring it up is because as we were talking about that, I started thinking like those are the very things that we dealt with. You know, we talked about the moments in our life when we faced discrimination. We talked about the moments in our life when we faced various things, but it was the fear piece. Like I personally believe that racism and discrimination is driven by fear and ignorance.
It is.
Fear and ignorance.
That's it.
You know,
that's it.
I've been studying a lot of stuff around the topic, and one of the things that I really started looking at was I started looking at the KKK. I started looking at the the civil rights movement. I started looking at the women's suffrage movement. I started looking at the various things that happened over the course of history. And it's so crazy because what you find when it comes to the KKK, that really was established to keep Blacks from moving out, from moving up, from like actually transitioning and evolving to be more, to be stronger, more intelligent, to own more. You know, and then you think about the things like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You know, that's like what, almost about 100 years ago now, where you had Blacks who were peaceful, loving people, had a whole economy built right there, and the government bombed them. Like literally came in, shooting them up, bombing them and stuff. And these are things that you got to search out, you got to study on.
Absolutely.
And it's, you know, and I'm bringing all this up because even as you're talking now, like it's the fear. It was the fear that, you know, one young lady I saw, she posted a post, and this has been replayed a few times over and over again. I don't know if you saw it, but she, at the end of what she said, and she was so passionate and so furious, and it was during the Black Lives Matter, all of the protests and the marches, the peaceful protests that were going on. And she said, you know, what white people need to be glad that Blacks are just looking for change and not looking for for revenge. And the thought process behind the KKK, as I study it out, was more so stopping blacks because they knew that if they could get to a certain level, they felt like they would take them over and treat them the way that we had been treated. And I don't think that anyone that I've ever spoken to has ever seriously been like, we need to rise up and treat them the way we've been treated. You know, I've heard, now this is what I've heard. I've heard people say, you know, if they only knew what it felt like.
Yes.
That's different than saying, let's treat them the way that they treated us. No, it's if they only knew what it felt like. And that's just, you know, that's why I brought it up, because it's driven by fear. But
absolutely. So there's two things I've been watching recently. One is called 13. That's on Netflix. And the other one is called Underground. Underground, I think it came out in 2018, 2016, something like that.
Right.
And with the actress the sister, Somerlet's sister, Jolie Somerlet.
Okay, I was like,
listen, I'm trying to guess her name, but they have a piece with Harriet Tubman in it.
Yeah.
And she's doing a speech. And one of the things she says, I mean, I actually need to go back and rewatch that episode because her speech was so powerful. And she was basically giving a speech to other abolitionists who were, you know, against slavery. So everyone in the audience was white.
Right.
And she was trying to give them an understanding that people think that we want, in her era, they wanted revenge against, there you go. Thank you, girl. They wanted revenge against, yes. They wanted revenge against their slave owners by putting them back in slavery. Wow. And she said there's nothing that I will wish slavery on. She said there's no one that I will wish slavery on, even her slaver. So it was like, you don't understand the pain that these people went through. They're not wishing it on anyone else. They're just wanting out. Wow. 13 was, oh my God, 13 was so powerful. It goes in so many depths, you know, from slavery all the way up to current today. But one of the biggest things they talked about is how in some of the black and white movies, how the goal was to demonize the black man. So in any way possible, it was to demonize him. So he can look fearful to, so people can be fearful of him, to want to rid him of him, the black man. So Jarvis, if you can put your information about your book, also someone is asking about your book, if you can get that in there. In hindsight, that is still going on today, and how fear is inflicted by, and not just the black race, by what we've already spoken about, the Asian race, the Muslim race, the Arab race, not the Muslim race, the Arab race. So all of those things where things have caused fear to be inflicted upon. Right. Merely because of the lack of understanding. If you try to understand more, then you will not have that fear. And I think sometimes people aren't willing to understand. I met some of the nicest people when I lived overseas. My Bible study consisted of 2 Australians, 2 Chinese, 2 Indians, a group from Texas, a group from Minnesota, a group from Chicago. We were all in this huge melting pot of people, and they were the most loving Christian people that I have met, that were outside of what I grew up in. So I think sometimes for those of us who are Christians, God gives us 2 kinds of fear. The fear to yes. Thank you. Is it Marquisha?
It's
Thank
Marquesta.
You, Marquesta. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Marquesta. God gives us 2 kinds of fear. one of to give us knowledge when something is wrong, and the other to give us knowledge to reverence him. So that fear of race is not there. That's
Right.
something that was created. But we do have something else we want to share with you guys today. We have a clip from a minister talking about race, and his name is Judah. What's his last name, Jarvis?
Smith. That man is
Judah Smith. Judah Smith.
Smith.
So we're going to share this with you guys. Please jump in if you have some questions in regards to this video. Jarvis is going to set it up for us. And this is just a teaching moment, just to give some more insight from someone who doesn't look like us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, wow. Sorry, I just saw something else there. My bad.
You're fine. And just to set this up, as Jarvis is setting that up, this is a clip of a group of ministers under TD Jakes who are speaking about race and racial issues. So it's a multicultural group, and they're all on Zoom, and they're just discussing race when it comes down to religion and other things.
All right, it's gonna share right now.
Okay.
You see it?
Yes. Can you blow it up just a bit bigger?
Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be sharing a video with you of a white man who is telling the truth as he is speaking to his own people. He's speaking very candidly. It's actually a panel of white evangelical pastors, and he is one of the pastors. And he's speaking very candidly, although he isn't calling it hypocrisy. Pretty much what he describes is hypocrisy among so-called white people. Anyway, I am going to roll the video, and I will be right back with some additional commentary on the subject.
I took too much time. Sure. I'll jump in after that. I'll take the risk to jump in after those statements, Bishop. I cannot sit here and not be completely staggered that I believe, if I can speak to preachers, particularly white preachers for a moment, we have colluded with the culture in this country. We have colluded, and as a result, we have developed what I think is a caricature of what actual Christianity looks like. And now, mainstream white evangelicalism is actually synonymous with temporary institutions and constructs that in some cases have zero connection to the teachings of Jesus or his eternal kingdom. And we have preached Americana as if at times it is scripture. And I say that passionately because I know there are white preachers out there, and you know what I'm talking about. We were taught scriptures like honor the king. We were taught vehemently to always honor the president. We were taught, and though I carry many values to this day in terms of respecting my government and paying my taxes and voting, all of which I count as a privilege, what I am deeply concerned, Bishop, is the collusion of the communicators in this country. I think we have on our hands what we have served up. And as a result, white evangelicals in this country, as we speak right now on this call, are still like, wait, what? Wait, what? For instance, Bishop, I saw a sweet white lady say, why is it that the African American community loves everything about Christianity but slavery? And there it is. We have colluded with the culture, so much so that white America believes that even the story of Jesus belongs to us. And we are incapable of seeing that the gospel through Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, my brothers and sisters, the gospel went to Africa before it went to Rome. And yet we believe that Jesus Christ was brought over in the colonization of this country. That is absolutely outlandish. It is ignorant and is once again profoundly indicative of what is called white privilege. And I would like to say this to my white brothers and sisters. If any of us say we are not racist, that's called proof. My brothers and sisters, now is not the time for all of us to put forth, and I'm speaking to white pastors and leaders. I am not interested in your sorry. I am not interested in the fact that you have a friend of color. And I am not interested. I heard from an African American pastor in Phoenix, Arizona. He privately emailed me and said, Pastor, pray for me. I am the only black man on this staff. And even in times of turmoil like this, I feel like I cannot even speak during a staff meeting at my own church. That is a caricature of the Christianity that Jesus preached.
Selah. Good word, Judah. Good word.
Woo! So as you've just heard, this man laid it out without even calling them hypocrites. That's pretty much what he has done in a nutshell. He has called his own people to the carpet and showing the hypocrisy of how they believe that all of history, all of biblical history, all of anything dealing with righteousness belongs to them. And they are confused as to why we don't accept certain things. For the one woman he talked about who said how so-called black people can accept Christianity, but they can't accept slavery. This is her way of saying, you all should deal with slavery because it's in the Bible. Now, understand this. I am fully aware of what is in the Bible. I'm fully aware of biblical history and biblical prophecy. I'm also fully aware of the curses, okay? But in all of that, curses were not just pronounced or spoken against so-called black people. Those who have taken part in certain things, they have to reap what they have sown as well. But that's not what I'm trying to talk about in this particular video. I'm just talking about what this white evangelical pastor felt the need to say, and he was choking back tears in other parts of the interview. The interview was actually more than an hour long, but he's trying to explain to his people that how dare you sit up here with this righteous persona that doesn't even resemble anything of righteousness concerning Hamashiach, or the one who the world calls Jesus. He basically said that there is nothing about them that is even remotely similar. Now, this video was put out last year, okay? This interview or this panel was put together last year. But since then, we have seen even more evidence that white evangelicals, they ride around on their high horse believing that because they have a certain level of wealth and prosperity, in which the Bible spoke of these things concerning the children of Israel, which are so-called black people, it spoke of how he was going to use them to provoke us to jealousy. But even that is misapplied to other white people, because everyone refuses to believe who we are in history. But this pastor on this panel, he knows something. He talked about how the gospel was in regions of Africa before it ever even touched down in any white area, meaning the truth or the word originated or had its origins among so-called black people, meaning that is our history that has been snatched and marketed and spread around the world as some type of white history. And so, for me, it is refreshing to see more and more people bold enough to stand for the truth, although we know that most will not accept it or receive it. As a matter of fact, many of you under the sound of my voice, if you are a Gentile or so-called white person, you probably feel like he's a traitor for telling the truth, for even saying anything about this. And unfortunately, if you're anything like that congressman, the congresswoman, should I say, that is going around saying that people should be hung and all of this kind of stuff, you're probably believing that this man should go and meet his maker because he's telling the truth. At the end of the day, you have to understand, and you should know this by now, that the Most High is not mocked. Whatsoever man or woman sows, that shall they also reap, and that you cannot get away with anything. Okay, you reap what you sow. And so if it is your belief that it is okay to rewrite history because it makes you look good, or you think it makes you look good, it actually makes you look bad, not to accept the truth for what it is. Now, I'm able to accept the truth. I know when I understand that there was a curse applied to my people for disobedience to our Creator. We are the original people on this planet. And the dominion of our regions has been taken away from us because of disobedience, because of sin. And this is why others dominate over us. Despite our physical strength as a people, until that curse is lifted, we will forever be in that spot until that curse is lifted. But you see, there is an appointed time for the lifting of the curse. And that is the part that many of you don't look forward to, because you understand that there is something else that is attached to that as well. That the Most High, the creator of heaven and earth, the one that you all call God or Jesus or whatever, he is going to right every wrong. And that means those of you who have not repented is not going to stand before him in peace. But anyway, I applaud this minister, this pastor, or whoever, for bringing forth this truth. There are so many more just like him who are bringing these truths out. Many won't receive it. They would rather perish than to accept the truth for what it is. They'd rather continue in their strong delusion. That's just the way it is. Many would rather continue in their strong delusion than to accept the truth. I am done with this video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, share and like this video, and with that, I am out. Be sure to ring the bell to be notified of new uploads on this channel, and also comment, share, like, and subscribe.
Wow.
Where you want to start?
Man, she said a whole lot. She definitely said a whole lot. Let me go ahead and stop. Yeah, she said a whole lot. Man, first, I applaud Judah. I never really got a chance to know him personally. We growing up in Washington, he went to school in a place called Squim, or it was either Snohomish or Squim. But we played against him athletically, and what I remember of him is he was that cool kid. So we were kind of in that same age bracket. But anybody who knows who Judah Smith is knows that he's a very drive it home, keep it real. If I'm wrong, I'm gonna tell you that I'm wrong. He's if I could compare him to anybody, I would say if you're familiar with Michael Todd, he's like that version of, he's a white version of Michael Todd. I mean, it sounds weird to say that, but he's got that same type of passion, reverence, zeal, drive to just want to see people come together. And I actually went back and searched out the rest of that sit down that they did, and he did get pretty emotional. And they weren't crocodile tears. They were tears of repentance. They were tears of hurt. You could tell that he just loves people so much, and he doesn't not that he doesn't understand, because he does understand, but he loves people so much. He wants everyone to see people the same way that God would see people. I would say it like that. But yeah, he said some great stuff. And I think that's accurate. The most segregated day of the entire week is Sunday. You know, during the work week, we all work together. We all, play sports together. But when it comes to Sunday, you go to your church, I go to my church. You have a black pastor over here, so that's a black church. A white pastor over here, so that's a white church. And people segregate off into these little pods of people who look like them, act like them, talk like them. I know earlier today, I was telling you that I watched another video where the pastors and there were leaders of churches in Decatur, Georgia, and they were all white evangelical pastors. They did a full out letter of repentance, like, we are so sorry to the black community, and they came out strongly and said Black lives matter to God, so they should matter to all of the rest of us. And I think that sometimes we get hung up on that Black Lives Matter piece, and we fight back with the all lives matter, all lives matter, all lives matter, and that's true, and I think from where Judah was coming from, he was pretty much laying it out there saying, listen, we as Christians, we say all lives matter to God. God loves all people. But really, in our serving, where have we served the people that don't look like us? Where have we loved the people that don't look like us? Where have we sown into the lives of the people who don't look like us? How many of us have actually gone into those inner city communities and spent time getting to know the people in those inner city communities, whether they're Black, whether they're Asian, whether they're Hispanic, whatever their race is, and just sat down and got to know them. If you know anything, and this is what I love about Jesus, like as a public figure, as a hero, as the epitome of Christianity, he loved everybody. That was you never saw him in a place where he was dragging anybody. You didn't see him in a place where you saw him get angry. You saw him flip some tables. That had nothing to do with the color of people's skin. It's funny because
Not sin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he looks at it, and when you think of Jesus, we always talk about. It's funny because people kind of hit Christians with this whole, this is how you're supposed to be. And I was talking about this a little bit the other day, but the reality is the reason why I really love the person of Jesus, the idea of Jesus, the fact that Jesus walked the earth, is that every story about him, when you see him, he's talking to people he shouldn't talk. He's talked to based off of the law. He's touching people he shouldn't be touching because based off the law, think about leprosy and all this stuff. He's the woman with the issue of blood, like all these different stories. He's sitting down and having conversations with people who the Pharisees wouldn't sit down and have conversations with, the stripper, the drug dealer, the gambler, the loan shark. He sat with all these people. And I think, like, when I look at this, and I look at what Judah said, that's where I saw his passion coming from. He's like, how in the world can we say that we are Christians and we don't love people for who they are? Absolutely. We don't look past their inconsistencies, and
even their ignorances and their fears.
Yeah, and their fears. And he said a lot. Like I'm just kind of like, watching it again just now. I was like, whoop, your boy's blown.
Absolutely. I think when he made the comment about the friend of his that was a minister and he was the only Black man in the room, and until you are the token person of color, to how can I put it, to hold up their standards or meeting their quota of Black person, until you're that person just there to meet a quota, not to actually bring in information. And until people from other races can see that can sit in that seat, then they won't understand.
Yeah.
But when you're willing to understand that sometimes we are placed in positions just merely to meet quotas, not to necessarily have an intelligent conversation.
Yes.
Or to provide information to someone that we have a boatload of information to give. Until you open that door, then you're not going to see racism as racism.
Right.
And that's what we have to do. And one of the most powerful things I heard in the last month about racism was from a kid. And I was watching a reality TV show about, and this kid was getting ready to go off to college to Tennessee. And his mother, who was a doctor, was trying to explain to him, you're going to face a different type of racism that you're used to because you come from parents who are wealthy. So you're getting ready to be placed in a town in which people are very ignorant to people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, what are you going to do when you're faced with your first racial slur? And this kid said, well, Mom, it'll be a teachable moment so I can teach them something. He didn't say, I'm going to do this or do that or react like people would think a teenager would react.
Yeah.
He says, I'm going to teach them. So this is how we're going to eliminate racial discrimination, by teaching people. We have to be able to teach them things. We have to be vocal enough to, even if we're in that room where we're the only token person of color, that we can teach them something. And that's the key. Are we willing to be able to teach? Are we still going to be angry at their ignorance and their fear?
I have a question. Let me ask you this question. So how, for just an average person, how do you teach somebody something? Because I like that young man's comment was powerful. And in my mind, I can think of so many different ways that I can teach somebody something when it comes to it's a teachable moment. You can teach them something when it comes to racism, but what is something that you would recommend for just a random person, the average person?
I can speak for myself. Not too long ago, I had a conversation with an exec, and my conversation with them was, and this was a person who was white, and I said, you have to learn how to deal with all types of people, even those that you're not used to.
Yeah.
And their statement was, what do you do when you want to just walk in and fire someone? And I said, you can't. What you have to do is you have to learn to deal with people from different backgrounds than yourself.
Right.
And I said, and how you do that is you try to understand the person and not take every situation personally.
Yes.
I just told someone just recently, I say, listen, I have learned to speak on the position of offense. And I said, when I say I speak to it, I tell it no longer controls me. So I no longer hold it, period. Not just for someone in a racial issue, in any issue.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing that a lot of times people do. They instantly take offense for someone else's personal issue with them. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, I'm not going to hold that offense. But you would teach them by explaining to them this is not your issue. So the issue is understanding that in this kid's defense, understanding that, hey, listen, whatever you think of me is not true. Maybe you can explain to me why you decided to call me a word that I'm telling you is not true.
Yeah,
because it's not what they call you. It's who you answer to.
Yes, very true. Yeah. Very true. Man, it's and I'm thinking about that. It's a lot of times, and you've probably seen it. I know I've seen it quite a few times where you will get somebody they'll call a black person out their name. They're like, "Hey, nigga," and then all of a sudden, that person, their reaction, it's almost like they react out of pride as opposed to thinking.
Absolutely.
Saying.
Oh, absolutely.
So you responded because you knew that they were talking to you. Now it's like, oh, I'm gonna teach you a lesson.
Yes.
I'm thinking about. I don't know if you remember this happened. Like this happened a few months back, maybe back in the middle of the summer, last summer. But Ricky Smiley, him and his family were out, and some, the young women or the women that were with him, I don't want to say young because they were all different ages, but
Yes.
the women were in the car, and a white guy called them black bees, like
Yes.
just out the name. And what Ricky Smiley and the other fellas did is they went and just talked to him. And you could tell he was like, the guy was uptight and scared. That was a teachable moment. Even at the end of it, Ricky Smiley said, I bet you won't do that no more, won't you?
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, he made him apologize and everything. And it was to watch him do that. That's the reaction that all of us should have in some way, shape, or fashion, where it's the peaceful protest. It's the not responding when they call you out your name. They're not winning because they're calling you something that you're not.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, that you heard it, you just keep it moving. Now,
Yes.
they get to a point where they actually physically are approaching you and touching you, that's totally different.
That's
but,
different.
You're showing them something by not responding.
Mm-hmm.
Quite honestly, it's not about, at that point, it's not about my pride. It's about my heart. And in my heart, I love you. And I don't understand why you're saying what you're saying, but I'm going to keep covering you and praying for you. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is, if they hated Jesus, they're going to hate me.
Yep.
Plain and simple.
Absolutely.
That's not a churchy answer. They hated Gandhi. They're going to hate me. They hated Martin Luther King. They're going to hate me. Shoot, they hated Malcolm X. They're going to hate me.
and you just spoke, all these men are men of color.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even thinking about like John F. Kennedy, they hated him.
Yes.
So they're gonna hate me. Like, as I'm going, I'm thinking about people who were agents of change, who wanted to see it.
Absolutely.
They hated them. So what makes me think that I'm gonna be any different than that? I'm a man who walks around with a heart of gold, that loves everybody that I come in contact with, and I just want to see the best for them. I want to make sure that I can do whatever I can to serve and help them. As much as I would think that everyone would like that. And then I got this thing that really startles people. It's a combination of intelligence and dark skin. That's a scary thing for some reason.
It is. Absolutely. I would agree.
Yeah, and I'm praying that goes away. I don't want people to.
I don't know if you will see that in your lifetime. I pray that you do, but I don't know if we'll see that, because we still have a lot of ignorance in this world.
Right.
A lot of ignorance, and people are still unsure of the people that have built this country literally on their backs.
Yeah.
They're not sure that they still want us to win. So we have to wear many hats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, 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 a lot of hats. As you were saying that, I was thinking about even in the corporate space, right? The world, I believe, and I agree with you, I don't know that I will see that in my lifetime. But I believe my children will be able to see it, and that's not the Martin Luther King, I have a dream. I really believe that they're going to see it, because what happened with the George Floyd situation is it happened during a time when the world was almost at a standstill.
Already.
Everybody was forced to watch it. Like, we get so busy in our hustle and bustle that had that happened at any other time other than during COVID, it would have carried for about 2 months and then been gone. And that was the fear of everybody, is that after this 2 months is over, like, what are we going to do? Well, no, it took and it picked up traction, and that traction started steamrolling, and now that steam engine is running. And because we all watched it over and over and over again, it's something that we will remember every single year. It's something that companies worldwide are pushing, because that's the initiative all year long. I've watched as corporations have been trying to build their diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's, when we think about that, our diversity, you and I are diverse. The equity piece, it's funny because there's a picture of 3 Black boys, and they're trying to see over a fence, right? And this is where we're trying to get to. This is what the National Elimination of Racism Day is all about. So they're 3 Black boys trying to look over a fence to see a baseball game. Now, in that picture, if you want to talk about what it looks like, you have one boy that's about 3 feet tall, another boy that's about, 5'6", another one that's probably like 6 foot. Well, the equity piece, the equality of it is you give each of them a box that's high enough for them to look over the fence. So the little boy has the biggest box, the second tallest boy has one, and they can just see over the fence. But you really want to start driving and breaking down racism, you really want to start driving and eliminating this thing called racism, then you have to include them. Yeah, they're equal because they see the game. They outside the game. But the inclusion,
nobody gave them a ladder. They gave them boxes.
Yeah, but the inclusion piece would be getting them on the other side of that fence, sitting in the stands. And that's what we look at every single day. Now, if you take that same thing, right, and you say you have, if you take that same picture, and this is the way that society has been built, you have a black man, you have a brown man, and you got a white man. The white man will be on this side of the fence, sitting down on the grass, watching the game, where the black man and the brown man will both be on their tippy toes on boxes looking over. And what we're trying to do is take that fence called racism and break it down and bring everybody into the field together.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think that I think we live in a society. I remember a teacher, I was probably in high school, and he said, Erica, we'll always have some form of racism. And I said, why is that? And he says, because when there's no longer a black and white issue, it'll be a tall and short issue. It'll be a big noses versus little noses. It'll be a short, it'll be a fat versus skinny. It'll be something that we will choose to separate ourselves from the others. And he said, he said, there will always be an issue of race. And I was like, wow, I never looked at it that way, but I was probably about in the 11th grade in high school when one of my history teachers told me that. And it's amazing because we separate for different things. So we also have to be inclusive.
Yes.
And we have to be willing to be inclusive, because not only did we fall prey of the separation, we started to agree with it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have to change our mindsets. All of the different races, we have to change our mindsets, because if we want to sit at the table, we got to say that we deserve to be there.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any last words before we end?
Well, I would say I think like tonight's conversation was good, and these are conversations that need to continue to go on. It's about what's the next step, what's the action that you're going to take. So what I would challenge everyone to do is I would challenge you to do a self-evaluation. And racism comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors. So if you are the black person who has issues with the white person, you have a race issue in your heart. That's the honest to God truth. If you have an issue with white people, meaning like you have a problem with them because of the color of their skin, and you're blaming the whites that you're around today for the things that whites have done in the past, then that's a race issue in your heart, and you have to check that in your heart. And that goes for any race, whether you're Asian, Hispanic, Polynesian, whatever your race is. And I want to challenge you that when you identify those things, to be intentional about the discovery of who's across the aisle from you. What is it like to be that person? Ask the questions, make the friendships, be intentional about building those friendships. If you're in a corporate space, be intentional, not the token black guy, and that corporate space can go into ministry as well. Because I'm thinking about the person that he said that was at that church. I've been that person in a group of people where I saw the issue, but I couldn't speak up on it because I would be scrutinized heavily, and it would be like, oh, you're just taking it too serious. Don't let that be you. And so I want to challenge you to quit looking for the change and be the change. It all starts with you. You're the person that's going to take the step. You're the person that's going to start thinking differently. It's going to start actually looking at people with your heart as opposed to just staring at them with your eyes. You're the person who is going to become the hands and feet of Jesus, the hands and feet of peace, the hands and feet of unity, the hands and feet of reconciliation. But it starts with identifying in yourself the same way that Judah Smith was very passionate about where he stood. I'm very passionate about where I stand. I stand in solidarity with him completely, you know, and that's for everybody because I've seen it come from every angle. As a Black man, you know, you get discriminated against from Asians, from brown, or like whatever it is, it's coming at you, and it hurts the most when it comes from people who look like you. So check
Absolutely
and get it right. So
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to have you tonight. I think I couldn't have done this call anybody else better than you, Jarvis. I thank you for your input. I thank you guys for tuning in with us tonight. I want you guys to do the work. It takes work. It takes work from us and it takes work from everyone else to be able to eliminate racial discrimination. I don't care how hard you see things are not changing. They are changing. Things are changing. We are not where our parents used to be. We are not where our grandparents used to be, but we still have so much work to do. So be the change. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. Thank you for listening to Blended Voices Magazine podcast. We will see you in a few weeks.
see you later.